So let's talk about the budget preparation process and the motivational aspects of a budget. If it does really set you up for success, it helps motivate employees, staff, managers to attain certain goals, or can it be dysfunctional and discourage attainment of those goals? So we're going to take a closer look at some of the thoughts that go into that and looking at management behavior as it relates to budgeting. Two types of budgets or two methodologies. One is a top-down approach, one's a bottom-up. Top-down is when management says, here's our goals, here's where we need to be, here's what we're going to do, and they assign it, and it flows downhill and says, you need to attain these results. A bottom-up budget is more participatory. It actually has input from folks that have, at the hands-on level, ideally a better understanding of what's really feasible and what's not. And there are hazards to both of these. So what's the term budgetary slack all about? Well, budgetary slack says if I'm being judged on my performance, I do not want to set too high a goal on the revenue front. I may not get it. I also don't want to underestimate my expenses because I'll be looked upon unfavorably if I exceed the costs or expenses that are budgeted to me. So there may be a tendency to understate the revenues and overstate the expenses, especially on a bottom-up type budget. Same thing with forecasts. We're looking and requiring, we have the forecasts that we may get from management or forecasts that we get from a variety of levels. How do we evaluate those forecasts? Well, we look at historical trends. What's happened in the past? What do we project in the future? Any new product innovations, any changes, anything that's going to affect the demand? How about general economic conditions? Is there an element of what's going on with the economy that we need to be aware of and consider as it impacts both our revenues and expenses and the industry as a whole, the industry conditions associated? And then we have our own strategic competitive plan. Maybe we're going to be the low price leader. Maybe we're seeking to be a premium producer, less cost sensitive. And again, those will all affect the demands associated. And then we have the ethical grounds. We started talking about the nature of trying to minimize sales goals and requirements and maximizing expenses so we're not judged too harshly. So there's a tendency to potentially pad the budget. There's a potential for saying, well, I'm going to put in a few more expenses here. If I use them, great. If I don't, I'll allocate them somewhere else. So I can always use the money. But then that actually distorts the picture. Those are a little bit deceiving and would be considered unethical. We can misclassify expenses. The idea of overstating revenues is understating expenses to maximize our profits. These are all motivations that we might be think about doing, trying to accomplish, get the goals. I mean, think from a sales perspective. If you are a sales manager and you have a bonus based on attaining sales, well, if you exceed your projected sales by 10%, that's good. If you fall short on your sales by 10%, that's not so good. Not only will your bonuses be affected, but your impression to the upper level management of how you are accomplishing your goals, your task will also be affected. So you're kind of at odds and you're trying to you're basically setting yourself up to succeed, and you want to exceed the sales budget. You don't want to overspend on the expense side of things. So you're going to be in a situation where you might have some conflicts. The other side of budgeting is we want open books. We want to have our staff, managers, our employees aware of what those budgets are. We also want to motivate them to exceed the revenue side and minimize or reduce the expense side. Having employees aware of where the budgets stand gives a better indicator that they can actually do something about it. There's a story about FedEx. Federal Express used to they want to pack efficiently their planes and when they're shipping and their trucks and how their things went. And they used to just pop a number, 60%, 65%. They were calling that their loading efficiency. As it turned out, these numbers were made up, but it really did motivate employees because they said, let me get to 70%. Let me get to 75. That's the gamification side of things. And they were actually getting more efficient, even though the numbers were ballparks, they were not really accurate. There was no scientific method to them, but it turns out it was a motivator by being able to have staff and employees see the efficiency that they were accomplishing, and it helped to encourage them to be more efficient in the process. So that concludes our initial budgeting rounds and understanding of how the budgets come together and some of the motivations associated with the end product and the results of those budgets. So we're going to see how management uses those. We're going to go a little deeper dive in our next module when we get to module 13, saying, okay, we have standards, standard costs, and standard quantities, and we're going to have actual costs and actual quantities that are going to be integrated and understood. And we're going to analyze the variances associated with those. Favorable variances, unfavorable variances. We may be doing better on some fronts and worse on others. That's what we're going to do some analysis, and we're going to be able to understand our comparisons to budget against standards and actual. But that concludes module 22. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing and investing, and we'll look forward to continuing on to module 23 together. See you soon.